Late summer 1943, Bryansk forests. Our reconnaissance group was sent into the middle of nowhere to the marshes to find out the possibility of moving artillery to the flank of the fascists. There was a dry passage in the swamps 100 meters wide, and if we drag guns through this corridor, we can hit the Nazis from the flank. Tanks can't get through there. First of all, the thicket is thick, and secondly, a tank is heavy. It's liable to land in the swamp. Try to pull it out. But light guns, if pulled by horses, will be just fine. But the Nazis also knew about this corridor and realized its importance. That's why they covered it well. They built a bunker, dug trenches, stretched barbed wire in front of the trenches, everything as it should be. You can't take it by surprise. And here we are lying on our bellies, 5 of us in the bushes, all camouflaged, stabbed with twigs, like lions. From 2 steps, we are indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. And in front of us, just a stone's throw away, German trenches. The trenches are not deep because the water is nearby. To the right and left is swamp. We can't get around them, and it'll be hard to break through. There are 40 men there, and behind the bunker is a dugout, whispers the commander, studying the situation in the optics. Aha, 3 machine guns and even a mortar. It will be very difficult to get them out of here. I supplement the information. On the right, in 100 meters, I see a hut. Slightly audibly reports our sniper Tuliev, who lay down next to me. We look into the thicket and really notice a dilapidated wooden log cabin between the centuries-old trunks. The building is barely distinguishable against the background of the forest, and only Tuliev's keen eye could see the moss-covered hut at such a distance. What kind of a shack is this? Semyonov, go to this wreck and check if there's a sniper there, or he'll shoot us all. And I beg you, do everything quietly, the commander ordered without taking his eyes off the optics. I cautiously crawled back and, covering myself with bushes and trees, began to slowly approach the hut. At times it was out of sight behind the tree trunks, but I clearly kept to the direction. I crawled 100 meters, but the hut did not come closer. I moved on. Another 100 meters, no result. What is this nonsense? Whispering indignation. It's not a mirage, everyone saw it. There she is, 100 meters away from me. I run over another 200 meters, but the hut seems to be mocking me, as it was 100 meters away from me, so not a meter closer. I sat down under a tree and stared at the hut, trying to collect my thoughts in a heap. First, I pinched myself to check if it was a dream. Then I began to quietly say the situation out loud. So, what do we have? There is a hut 100 meters away from me, and there is an order to inspect it for enemy forces. The order must be obeyed. Petrovich won't understand if I tell him the hut escaped from me. Ugh, I can't get my head around it. I've gone away from the group for almost half a kilometer and still haven't caught up with the hut. Isn't it crazy? Suddenly, I hear a woman's voice from the side of the swamp.
Help! Help!
I jumped from surprise. Where in this wilderness people and even the female sex? After wading through the thickets, I see the picture. A young girl fell into the mire. She stumbled. She is already sucked up to her chest, but she grasped the root of a mighty oak tree with both hands and is holding on with her last strength. Naturally, I rushed to her aid. I grabbed her arm and pulled her as fast as I could to the shore. And then something happened that made me turn gray before my time. The girl grabs my hand with a steel grip, and with her other hand continues to hold on to the root. Then she pulls me toward her with incredible force. Her eyes turn a dark burgundy color, and in a kind of growling voice she says,
"Listen up, warrior. I'm in trouble. I've been like this for 2 weeks now. We happen to have a disagreement with the owner of these swamps. He and I got into a heated argument, so he grabbed me and dragged me into the swamp. Nothing good is gonna happen to me there. So, I don't know how, but you gotta pull me out of his clutches or I'm gonna take you with me. You got it?"
While she was saying all this to me, her appearance changed, taking on a completely horrible appearance. In a matter of seconds, she went from a beautiful girl to a nightmare. Her skin became like the bark of an old grape bush that hung down in rags, but her arms and facial expressions never lost their flexibility. Instead of a nose, there were 2 holes and a mouth like a talking hollow tree. 2 blood-red eyes stared at me from the wooden head. All sorts of things happened to me in the war, but here, I must admit, I was a little crazy with fear. I tried to break free, but I couldn't. Her half-wooden vine hand literally wrapped its long fingers around my wrist. Grabbing my knife, I slashed at her a couple times. But in vain, not even a mark was left. And that thing started laughing as if it was mocking me. "Who are you?" I blurted out.
I am the mistress of this forest. You call me different names. Yaga, Leshi, Kikimora, Forest Spirit. All these are me.
I, of course, read as a child fairy tales about Baba Yaga, but to meet like this, if someone had told me, I would have laughed at him. But here I see it with my own eyes. Maybe I'm dreaming. No, my arm is breaking from the pain, so tightly held by this horrible thing. Then I notice how around it the water is moving in waves and sometimes tentacles come out, as thick as my leg. Catching my gaze, the hag explained,
She holds it tightly. I can't break free myself.
After a couple of minutes, having assessed the situation, I made a decision. Taking out an anti-personnel grenade, I decided to bluff a little and said, "Now you listen here. You have 2 options. Option number 1. I'm going to pull the pin from the grenade with my teeth and throw it under the root you're holding onto. The explosion will sever the root. I'll be dead, and you'll be at the disposal of your swamp friend. And, believe me, I have nothing to lose. If you don't follow orders, you'll be shot anyway. So 1 hour sooner, 1 hour later, it's all the same." Option number 2. I throw the grenade behind your back, right into the pool. The explosion will cause hell to break loose underwater for a few seconds. The tentacles will weaken, and I'll pull you out. But we're working on a mutually beneficial basis here. I release you, and you help me deal with the Germans in the trenches not far from here. What's your choice?
The second one.
The hag growled in an afterlife bass. And let's not be deceitful. I need to make sure that not a single German is alive there by morning. But no, leave one, we've been ordered to bring the tongue. I continued to argue.
I'll do it.
Resounded from a hollow in my head. Well, with God. I prayed and pulled the pin.
Don't mention it.
Hissed the hag. Nothing, you'll be patient. I encouraged her, throwing the grenade into the swamp. As soon as the grenade gurgled, I lay down on the ground, and a second-by-second countdown started in my head. For seconds later, the slurry surged and boiled. The pop was soft. The water muffled the sound of the explosion. I jumped up and yanked the hag's arm as hard as I could. With her other hand, she, too, apparently pulled the root toward her. Together, we pulled her out of the mire so hard that she flew out like a cork and flipped upside down in the air, hitting her back against the oak tree. The blow was so strong that leaves fell from the oak, and a couple of crows relieved themselves off schedule. "Are you all right, Grandma?" I asked, approaching the tree. But instead of gratitude, this monster jumped to his feet, and as if sitting it on a branch, which grew 4 meters above the ground. It ran through the tree crowns towards the hut so fast that I could not catch up with it on foot. Soon it would start to get dark. I started to make my way to my group, and 10 minutes later I was there. "Did you crawl to Berlin?" Petrovich frowned. "Yes, I ran into some stretch marks there. I had to disarm them." I lied. "Have you checked the house?" "Yes, everything's clean." Well, I could not report that the hut escaped from me, and then I met Baba Yaga. What was that noise? Yes, one of the stretching rods went off. I had to throw a grenade into the swamp. I continued to compose. The Germans, too, got worried. "Now they are staring through all binoculars," Petrovich complained. "And you still have to go at night for your tongue." "Don't worry, Petrovich, I'll get the tongue. It won't go anywhere." 50 meters to the right, I see movement, again reported Itoliev. Everyone turned around and stunned. A richly dressed German lady was walking past us through the forest towards the trenches. She was picking flowers and singing a song in the language of our enemy. Petrovich and I are old scouts. We know German perfectly, and when we saw and heard that, our jaws dropped to the ground. Good thing we were lying down. Meanwhile, carefree Frau with a bouquet of flowers came to the barbed wire and began to shout,
Gunther, Gunther, it's me, your mother. Gunther, are you here? Take me through this terrible wire.
The Germans in the trenches seemed to be as stunned by this picture as we are. For 10 minutes they couldn't believe their eyes. They wiped their binoculars, waved their hands, pointed at the Frau. Frau kept calling Gunther. Finally from the trenches sounded, Don't shoot! Do not shoot! It's my mom! A big brute came out of the trench and ran to the woman. Semyonov, is this your work? Menacingly sounded above my ear. No way, comrade commander. It's the first time I see this woman. This time I didn't lie. You're lying, aren't you? Did you find her in the hut? Honestly, Petrovich, I have never seen her. In the meantime, Gunther lifted a thorn, and the mother with difficulty got under it. Mom, how did you end up here? Gunther stared in surprise.
Boo son, our Führer from now on allowed parents to visit their sons at the front. I was kindly given a seat on the plane. I arrived a couple of hours ago and a little lost in this forest.
The hearing in the thicket was perfect and we could catch every word. What the hell is she talking about? What airplane? What Führer? Dazed whispered Petrovich. Apparently, Gunther also could not believe his ears, but his eyes saw his own mother, and it completely confused him. Gunther hugged her and escorted her into the dugout. We continued to lie there with sagging jaws. What kind of Parents' Day I just saw, Semyonov? The commander woke up. We still have to take the language and his mother arrived. How can we be now? Something tells me, Petrovich, that they will soon start having fun there. Let's just watch. It was getting dark. The moon lazily went out for its night shift. The sounds of the forest began to fade. Some movement on the right and left of the Germans, Tulev quietly reported. We took a closer look. A bluish, dimly glowing fog was coming from both sides of the German trenches. It gradually covered all their positions. After a couple of minutes, music began to come from the dugout. Then cheerful voices and laughter began to break out. At first the laughter was only male, but then women began to laugh as well. We heard many women's voices. They were squealing and laughing. The party was gaining momentum, drunken shouting and cackling, choral singing throughout the forest. Why are there so many women? We saw only one, puzzled Petrovich. But no one could explain this fact. We just watched the events unfold. The party had reached its peak. The noise was so loud that all the swamp frogs hid. I was about to move out to get my tongue while the Germans were making noise and drinking. But then everything went quiet, as if on cue. Just a deafening silence. The whole forest froze, and then a couple of seconds later we heard a scream. It was just a heartbreaking scream. I've never heard anything like it. It was like the forest itself was screaming in great pain. It was a mystical moment, and we were all struck to the bone. The night forest, the centuries-old trees, the huge moon. The German trenches are shrouded in a shimmering mist, and above it all a chilling scream. When all was quiet, a figure of inhuman proportions emerged from the fog into the moonlight, about 3 meters tall, arms to the ground, and skin that looked like it was peeling off in rags, red burning eyes staring straight at us. We felt in our gut that it could see us. Some kind of primal fear paralyzed us all. We lay there, afraid to move. I realized quite clearly that everything in the trenches was over. Apparently, having conveyed this thought to me, the creature leaped upward, right into the crowns of the trees. And the branches began to rustle and sag, marking the rapid movement of the creepy creature into the thicket of the night forest. What was that? Petrovich wheezed. A woodsman, answered Tulev. How do you know? My grandfather told me he was a hunter and saw it himself. Everyone realized that the Germans had something out of the ordinary. That's why there was no desire to go up to them at night. The commander understood this and decided to wait until morning. At dawn, the fog over the trenches cleared, and we moved straight towards them. A bloody path ran from the German positions to the place where the forest spirit had jumped on a tree. In the trenches themselves was an absolutely gruesome picture. The soldiers were torn to pieces, which were lying everywhere. But the most horrible thing awaited us in the German dugout. In the middle of the dugout, the severed heads were gathered in a neat pyramid. From the base of this pyramid, beams of torn-out arms were spreading in all directions. Around this horrible daisy, in absolute silence, with a stool in his hands, waltzed Mad Gunther. His head was completely gray, and a blissful smile was spreading on his face. All as promised, one left. I muttered quietly with horror in my eyes. What? Petrovich wheezed. Yes, no, nothing. Just trying to understand what happened here. Gunther we took with us. True, he was no use, but do not leave him here. Let the brass decide his fate. The dugout and the bazooka were blown up. After that, we went to ours. A couple of days later, artillery was transferred along the isthmus between the swamps. And in the first days of the fall began the Bryansk offensive operation, which resulted in the liberation of the city of Bryansk.